The morning after the storm, the air was heavy with the scent of broken earth and wet grass, and she woke to the silence that comes after everything has fallen. A part she did not know yet what was gone, she only knew that the walls were trembling. With the memory of wind and the sea had come too close to the edge of their world, she stepped outside barefoot, feeling the mud pull gently at her feet, as if the ground itself wanted her to stay still, but she could not. She had to find her daughter. She had to find the sound of her laughter somewhere in the quiet ruins of their small town. She walked past the fallen branches, the torn sheets of metal, the houses that leaned like tired old men, and she called her name, soft at first, then louder. As if her voice could stitch the sky back together, she thought of the night before, the way the storm had arrived like a beast with 1,000 voices. The way her daughter had clung to her, asking if the stars would come back, and she had said yes. They always do, even when you cannot see them. They are only hiding behind the clouds, waiting for the wind to calm now. The wind was gone, but the stars were still hiding, and the world felt like a stranger. She reached the road that led to the old school, the one her daughter used to walk every morning with her red bag bouncing against her back. The one with the small charm tied to the zipper, the charm that jingled like tiny bells. When she ran, she remembered the sound, now so clear, so bright, so alive that it hurt. She stopped by the fence where the wildflowers had once grown, but now they were buried beneath the dirt and salt. She knelt there and let her hands sink into the earth, as if she could feel her child's warmth still lingering. Beneath the surface, neighbors were searching too, their faces hollow, their eyes wide with the disbelief that such a night had really happened. They called out names that vanished into the mist. She wanted to tell them it would be all right, but the words would not come because she did not believe them herself. She only kept walking the way the tide keeps, moving forward even when it knows it will return empty. And it be midday. The sun came out pale and thin behind the torn clouds, and it made the broken glass on the ground shimmer like forgotten stars. She found a doll caught in the branches of a tree, its hair tangled, its dress torn, and she held it close for a moment because it smelled faintly of soap and summer. She whispered her daughter's name again, and the sound trembled. Like light through water, she walked on her body, moving without thought, her heart carrying the weight of 1,000 yesterdays. She reached the field where they used to fly kites, where her daughter once ran so fast she thought she could lift off into the sky. The grass there was flattened, and the colors of the kites were gone, but she could still see her small figure in her mind, spinning, laughing, shouting, "Look, Mama, look!" And she remembered how she had laughed too, not knowing that laughter could someday hurt. So Deeplish moved closer to the shore, where the waves were still restless. They rose and fell with the same rhythm as her breath. She could taste the salt on her lips, and it reminded her of tears she had not yet cried. She searched among the debris, broken wood, shattered tiles, the remains of lives scattered like lost stories, and then she saw it half buried in the sand. One small shoe, pale pink with faded flowers along the side. Her heart stopped for a moment and then began again, slower, softer, heavier. She knelt and lifted it with trembling hands, brushing away the wet sand. The strap was torn, the fabric soaked, but she knew it. She knew every thread of it. She had tied that strap every morning before school. She had watched her daughter hop on one foot and giggle when she got the wrong shoe on the wrong foot, and now it was all that was left. Pressed it to her chest, and the world fell silent again. She wanted to scream, but the sound would not come, because what could she say to the wind that had already taken so much? She sat there as the tide crept closer, the water touching her knees, her arms, her face, until she could not tell where the sea ended and her sorrow began. She looked out at the horizon, where the sky met the water, and imagined her daughter there somewhere in the light, dancing barefoot on the waves, calling her name like she used to when the world was still. Time passed. She did not know how long she sat there, only that the sky turned gold, and then gray, and then blue again. She remembered the nights they used to sit by the window listening to rain, and her daughter would ask about forever. "What does forever mean, Mama?" And she would say, "It means something that never ends." But now she knew forever was not about time. It was about love. It was about how something remains even when everything else is gone, even when the storm takes the house, the laughter, the sound of footsteps on the floor. There is still something left that does not break. She went back to the village, carrying the small shoe like a candle. She placed it on the windowsill where the light could find it, and she whispered a promise, not of return, not of hope, but of remembrance. She would remember The way her daughter's hair smelled of sunlight, the way her eyes reflected the sea. The way she had once held her hand and said, "Mama, the world is so big and beautiful, and I want to see it all." And she had smiled, not knowing that beauty could be so cruel. In the days that followed, she planted flowers by the fence. The same kind her daughter loved. She did not speak much. She did not need to. The flowers spoke for her. They bloomed quietly under the wounded sky, and when the wind passed through them, they whispered songs that only a mother could understand. Zamites. At dusk, she would sit by the shore and watch the waves, and she would see footprints appearing and disappearing in the wet sand, small footprints like a child running just ahead, and she would almost call out, but she knew the sea was only playing its gentle trick. She smiled softly and let the wind carry her tears. She thought of the shoe, now dry and clean, sitting by the window glowing in the light, and she knew that somewhere beyond this fragile world, her daughter was still running, still laughing, still free. She stood and looked at the horizon again and whispered, "Thank you, not to anyone, not to anything, but to the silence itself, for holding the pieces of her heart, for keeping the memory alive." And the tide moved in and out, as if answering her without words. She walked back home, the ground cool beneath her feet, the air filled with the scent of new rain. And though the world had changed, she carried something unbroken inside her, the kind of love that no storm could ever wash away. And every morning she would open the window, and the first thing she saw was the little shoe waiting there in the sunlight. And for a moment, just a moment, she could almost hear her daughter's laughter again, bright and soft, rising with the sound of the wind. And in that sound she found the strength to keep breathing, to keep walking, to keep loving in a world that had once taken everything, but somehow gave her back the courage to live. It. Days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, and the sea kept breathing like a great animal that had finally fallen asleep. She lived quietly near the edge of the shore, where the wind still carried the scent of salt and memory. Each morning she would open the window and see the little shoe resting in the sunlight, and she would whisper, "Good morning, my love," and the light would move across the room as if answering her without words. She had learned to live with silence. It had become her language, her prayer, her way of remembering. Zamites. At dusk, she would walk to the place where she had found the shoe. The sand there had changed shape again and again, but she could still feel her daughter's presence in the soft hum of the waves. She spoke softly to the water, telling it about the days that passed, about the flowers that bloomed by the fence and the birds that nested on the roof. She told the sea everything because she believed it listened. She believed it carried her words. Somewhere beyond the horizon, where her daughter might still be on evening when the air was warm and golden, she noticed something glimmering near the rocks. It was a small glass bottle washed up by the tide. She picked it up and saw inside a piece of paper folded so many times it looked fragile as breath. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling. The paper was blank, but faintly it smelled of soap and lilac, the same scent her daughter used to carry in her hair. She pressed it to her face and closed her eyes. The tears came quietly, not of pain but of recognition, as if the sea had brought her a whisper that words could not hold. At night she dreamed of the storm again, but this time there was no wind, only light, and in the middle of that light she saw her daughter standing barefoot on the water, her hair moving like silver threads. She smiled and said, "Mama, do not be afraid. I am only where the light sleeps, and when you talk to the sea, I hear you." Her voice was soft, but it filled the whole dream like music. When she woke, the window was open, and the morning light touched the shoe like a small sun. She smiled, and for the first time in so long, her smile reached her eyes. She began to write letters to her daughter, not to send them anywhere, but to let them breathe. She wrote about the clouds, the garden, the way the moon looked. When the tide was high, she placed each letter in a bottle and let the sea take it. Sometimes the waves returned the bottles empty, sometimes they disappeared forever. She did not mind. It was enough to imagine that somewhere beyond the blue, her daughter was reading them. The villagers would sometimes see her walking at dawn, her dress brushing the sand, her hair loose. They said she had become part of the sea, that she spoke its language, and maybe she did, because when the wind blew through the fields, the sound was not only of wind, it was of laughter, small and bright, like a child running through sunlight on morning. The tide left something else on the shore, a seashell shaped like a small heart. When she held it to her ear, she heard not the sea, but a faint Like breathing, she kept it on the windowsill beside the shoe, and every night before sleep she whispered goodnight to both seasons past the storms came and went, and though the world around her changed, she remained steady like a candle burning. Against the wind, the grief that once hollowed her had turned into something quiet, something like love that had forgotten how to hurt. She still missed her daughter every hour, but now the missing felt sacred, not empty. She knew that love did not. And it only changed shape, like water turning to mist, like light turning to memory on evening as the sky burned with pink and gold. She walked again to the shore. She carried no bottle, no letter, only the small seashell. She stood where the waves kissed her feet, and she whispered, "Thank you to the horizon. Thank you for letting me love her. Thank you for letting me keep her." And as the tide rose, she closed her eyes and felt the water wrap around her like an embrace. She did not move, she only listened, and somewhere deep in the sound of the sea, she heard her daughter's voice one last time, soft and full of joy, saying, "Mama, I am here." When she opened her eyes, the world was brighter than it had ever been. The sky, the sea, the sand, all shining with the same light. She turned and walked home slowly, her heart no longer heavy. The wind carrying her laughter, now light and endless like the wave sand from that day. The villagers said that when the storms returned, they could hear two voices in the wind, one of the sea and one of the mother, calling back to it, not with sorrow, but with love. And the world listened and remembered that even after the greatest loss, something beautiful still remains, something that never truly leaves. Years later, a child from another village found a bottle by the shore. Inside was a letter worn soft by water, the words almost faded but still breathing. They spoke of love, of light, of a daughter who once danced with the sea. The child read it aloud, and the wind seemed to listen, carrying the sound across the waves. That night, the mother sat by her window, the little shoe still resting in the sunlight, the seashell beside it, and though she did not know where her letters had gone, she felt a warmth in her chest, like someone somewhere had heard her. She smiled softly and closed her eyes. Outside, the sea moved gently, its voice no longer crying, only humming a lullaby, and in that sound the world felt whole again. The mother whispered, "Good night, my love," and the wind answered softly, "Good night."